Bruno Fernandes was once Brazil's most promising goalkeeper, but his career washed down the drain when he became Brazil's most wanted criminal. At the age of 20, he was a star at one of the biggest clubs in his country. But with his fame came temptation, arrogance, and a dark side no one could have foreseen. How did a football prodigy fall so far? What drove him to commit such a heinous crime? And could his story have ended differently? Well, it's time to find out. The year is 2010 and a younger goalkeeper is on the rise, capturing the hearts of fans across Brazil. His name? Bruno Fernandes de Souza. Bruno's story didn't start with fame or fortune. It began in the quiet training grounds of Atlético Mineiro, where he was just another kid chasing a dream. But Bruno wasn't like the others. Coaches quickly noticed his raw talent, the way he moved in goal, his lightning-fast reflexes, and his ability to command the defence like a seasoned leader. Even as a teenager, he stood out. Word spread fast, and soon bigger clubs started paying attention. Then came the call that would change his life. Flamengo, Brazil's most famous football club, wanted him. For any young player, this was the dream, a chance to play for a team with millions of fans and a history of greatness. Bruno packed his bags and headed to Rio de Janeiro, ready to prove himself on the biggest stage. At first, Bruno had to wait for his moment. He spent time on the bench, training hard and staying ready. Then, fate gave him his chance. Flamengo's starting goalkeeper got injured and Bruno was called up to take his place. It was a make or break moment, and Bruno didn't just rise to the occasion, he thrived. From the moment he stepped onto the pitch, Bruno played like he belonged. Save after save, he showed the world what he was capable of. The fans loved him. Every time he stopped a goal, the Maracanã Stadium erupted with chants of "Bruno, Bruno!" He became a hero to Flamengo supporters, and his performances only got better. Clean sheets started piling up, and Bruno became known as one of the best goalkeepers in Brazil. With his help, Flamengo began winning trophies, and Bruno was at the centre of it all, lifting silverware and celebrating with his teammates. His name was on everyone's lips, and his future seemed limitless. The national team started paying attention, and scouts from Europe's biggest clubs, including AC Milan, began circling. A move to Europe with all the fame and fortune that came with it seemed inevitable. Bruno was living the dream, going from a kid with a dream to one of the brightest stars in Brazilian football. It was a meteoric rise and the world was watching. But success has a way of feeding ego, and Bruno's growing sense of invincibility would soon lead him down a dark and irreversible path. It all began on May the 21st, 2009. Bruno, the golden boy of Brazilian football, was at a party basking in his fame. He had everything: money, a family, and a career most could only dream of. But that night, he wanted more. Among the crowd, he met Elisa Samudio, a young, beautiful woman who was captivated by the goalkeeper's charm. For Bruno, it was just another fling, a secret he thought he could keep hidden from his wife and daughters. But what started as a fleeting moment of indulgence would soon spiral into a nightmare. By August, Bruno's perfect world began to crack. Eliza was pregnant. She wanted him to take responsibility, to be a father to their child, but Bruno wasn't interested. He had too much to lose: his family, his reputation, and his dream of playing in Europe. Desperate to protect his image, Bruno pressured Eliza to have an abortion. She refused. She wanted to keep the baby and demanded that Bruno step up. When Bruno wouldn't cooperate, Eliza took action. She filed a paternity lawsuit and demanded child support. The media caught wind of the story, and suddenly Bruno's spotless image was under threat. Sponsors began to question their association with him, and fans whispered about their hero's indiscretions. The pressure was mounting, and Bruno's frustration grew. His dream move to AC Milan, which had seemed so close, now felt like it was slipping away. Then, in October 2009, things took a darker turn. Eliza went to the police, accusing Bruno and his friends of kidnapping her, forcing her to take medication to induce an abortion, and physically assaulting her. The allegations were shocking, but Bruno denied everything. He dismissed her claims as lies, telling the press, "She cannot cope with the fact that I do not want to be in a relationship with her." His words were cold and calculated, but they couldn't erase the growing scandal. On the 10th of February 2010, Eliza gave birth to a baby boy, naming him Bruno after his father. But Bruno Fernandes refused to acknowledge the child or provide financial support. The legal battles dragged on, and with each passing month, Bruno's frustration deepened. His career was stalling, his reputation was in tatters, and he felt trapped. The walls were closing in, and Bruno, desperate to protect his image, began to feel like there was only one way out. On June the 5th, 2010, Bruno played his final match for Flamengo. No one knew it at the time, but it would be the last professional game of his career. Just 4 days later, on June the 9th, Eliza Samudio disappeared. She had been lured to Bruno's house under the pretense of settling their disputes, but Bruno had already made a decision. A terrible, irreversible decision. He had decided that Eliza had to go. What followed would shock the nation. The golden boy of Brazilian football, once destined for greatness, would see his career and life unravel in the most horrifying way imaginable. Fame can twist a person's mind, and Bruno Fernandes de Souza was no exception. But nothing could prepare Brazil for the horror of his next move. What happened in that house still haunts the nation to this day. Bruno didn't act alone, he had help, friends, family, even his wife. They all played a part in what came next. Together they orchestrated a plan so cruel, so inhuman, that it shocked even the most hardened investigators. It started with a lie. They told Eliza Samudio they wanted to settle things. "Come to Bruno's house," they said. "We'll work it out." Eliza, desperate to resolve the ongoing conflict and secure a future for her baby, agreed. But the invitation was a trap. As soon as Eliza arrived, they grabbed her. She was locked up, held against her will, and completely at their mercy. For days, she was kept there, trapped, terrified, and alone. Well, not completely alone. There were always people around, but none to help her. They were there to hurt her. Bruno's teenage cousin, who would later confess everything to the police, described the nightmare in chilling detail. Eliza begged for her life, she cried for her baby, she pleaded for mercy, but no one listened. No one cared. Bruno, the man who had once been a hero to millions, showed no compassion. He had made up his mind. Eliza had to disappear. To carry out the final act, they brought in a man known as Bola, a former police officer turned hitman. Bola's job was simple: eliminate Eliza. What happened next is almost too horrific to put into words. Bola strangled her to death. But that wasn't the end. To ensure there was no evidence, they dismembered her body and fed the pieces to Bruno's dogs. It's a detail so grotesque, so unimaginable, that it still sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. Eliza's baby, however, survived. Somehow, amidst all the horror, the child was spared. But even then, Bruno showed no care for his son. The baby was abandoned in a slum, left like trash. When the police found him, it was a miracle he was still alive. The investigation moved quickly. Bruno's cousin, unable to keep quiet, confessed everything to the authorities. Phone records, witness statements, and Bruno's own actions painted a damning picture. On July the 7th, 2010, just a month after playing his last match for Flamengo, Bruno was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. The man who had once been a star goalkeeper, a fan favourite, was now a murderer. The football world was in disbelief. How could someone with so much talent, so much promise, throw it all away? How could a man who had everything, fame, fortune, and a future, commit such a monstrous act? For what? To avoid paying child support? To protect his reputation? The motives didn't make sense. They never would. The trial revealed every horrifying detail. How they lured Eliza to the house, how they tortured her, how they killed her, and the most painful part? Eliza's body was never found. Her family was denied even the small comfort of a burial, of saying goodbye. The pain they endured was immeasurable, a wound that would never heal. Brazil was in shock. This wasn't just any player, this was Bruno, the star keeper for Flamengo, a man who had been on the verge of playing for the national team. Now, he was a monster, a symbol of how fame and power can corrupt to the core. But the horror didn't end with Bruno, it extended to everyone who helped him, his friends, his family, even his wife. How could so many people be complicit in something so evil? It wasn't just a crime, it was a betrayal of humanity itself. Bruno's arrest marked the end of his football career, but the story didn't stop there. Incredibly, some people wanted to give him another chance. Years later, after serving part of his sentence, Bruno was released on appeal and even signed with a lower division football club. The decision sparked outrage. How could a man who had committed such a heinous crime be allowed back into the sport? What did it say about football, about society, that a murderer could be welcomed back simply because he could kick a ball? Bruno's story is a cautionary tale, not just about fame, but about the dark side of human nature. It forces us to ask hard questions. What do we value more, talent or morality? Success or justice? And what does it say about us when we cheer for someone who has destroyed lives? For Brazil, the scars of this tragedy remain, a haunting reminder of how far someone can fall when they believe they are untouchable. The trial of Bruno Fernandes de Souza was nothing short of a national spectacle. All of Brazil watched as the grim details of his crime unfolded in the courtroom. The man who had once been a hero on the pitch was now the villain in a story too horrifying to believe. His lawyers tried every trick in the book, painting him as a victim of circumstance, claiming he was misunderstood, even set up. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the testimonies from his own accomplices sealed his fate. The verdict came down hard. Guilty. Bruno was sentenced to 22 years in prison for orchestrating the kidnapping, torture and murder of Eliza Samudio. The courtroom was silent as the once celebrated goalkeeper was led away in handcuffs. Outside, the reaction was swift. Flamengo, the club that had once celebrated his talent, wasted no time cutting ties with him. Sponsors fled, distancing themselves from the scandal. Fans who had once chanted his name in stadiums now turned their backs in disgust. Bruno's fall from grace was complete. But in Brazil, the justice system moves at a pace slower than a Sunday league match. Appeals dragged on for years, and Bruno's case became mired in legal technicalities. Then, in 2017, something happened that shocked the nation. Bruno was released from prison. A legal loophole, a technicality, allowed him to walk free while his appeal was still pending. The news sent shockwaves across Brazil. How could a convicted murderer, someone who had committed such a heinous crime, be allowed to go free? Bruno wasted no time making headlines again. He announced that he wanted to return to football. The audacity of it all was staggering. A man who had orchestrated a brutal murder now wanted to lace up his boots and step back onto the pitch, as if nothing had happened. And the most shocking part? Some clubs actually considered it. Boa Esporte, a lower division team, signed him, sparking outrage across the country. The decision divided fans and the football world. Some argued that Bruno deserved a second chance, and that he had served his time and should be allowed to rebuild his life. Others were furious, saying that a man who had committed such a monstrous act had no place in the sport or in society. The controversy wasn't just about Bruno anymore, it was about the soul of football and the values it represented. Could the sport overlook such a heinous crime in the name of talent and winning? Bruno's return to football didn't last long. After just 5 games with Boa Esporte, the Supreme Court ordered him back to prison. His brief taste of freedom was over, but the damage had already been done. The saga exposed something deeply troubling about the sport. It showed how some clubs and fans were willing to overlook even the most horrific crimes if it meant a chance at success. It wasn't just about Bruno anymore, it was about the culture of football itself. The case forced Brazil to confront uncomfortable truths. It wasn't just about a fallen star, it was about violence against women in a country where such crimes are often overlooked or minimised. It was about a justice system that sometimes seems to value a man's talent more than a woman's life. Eliza Sambudio's murder became a symbol of this imbalance, a reminder of how far society still had to go in addressing these issues. The The controversy also raised difficult questions for fans. If your favourite player did something terrible, could you still cheer for them? Where do you draw the line? It's easy to say you'd never support a criminal, but when it's your team, your star player, things get complicated. People start making excuses. He served his time, they say. Everyone deserves a second chance. But do they? Are there some actions so unforgivable that they can never be redeemed? Bruno's story became a cautionary tale, not just about fame and power, but about morality and justice. It forced clubs, fans, and the football world to look in the mirror and ask hard questions. What do we value more? Talent or humanity? Success or justice? And what does it say about us when we cheer for someone who has destroyed lives? In the end, Bruno's case wasn't just about one man's fall from grace, it was about every player who has done something wrong, every club that has looked the other way, and every fan who has made excuses for their heroes. It was a story that forced football and society to confront its darkest truths. You'd think a murder conviction would end a football career for good, but in Bruno Fernandes de Sousa's case, you'd be wrong. His story didn't just shock Brazil, it exposed the dark side of football, fame, and society's willingness to forgive even the most unforgivable crimes. Bruno's case isn't just about one man's fall from grace, it's a mirror reflecting a much darker reality in Brazil. More than 1,310 women killed in domestic violence in 2019 alone. That's not just a number, that's mothers, daughters, sisters gone. And it gets worse. Nearly 5 in 100,000 women are killed each year in Brazil, one of the highest rates in the world. It's a grim reminder that Bruno's crime wasn't just one bad decision, it was part of a bigger problem. So, when clubs think about signing Bruno, what message does that send? Are we saying football matters more than a woman's life? It's a hard question, one that makes us all uncomfortable, but it's one we need to answer. If you want to follow the story of every country that FIFA has banned from the World Cup and why, check out our video here.